We had Jonathan Haidt, right? Didn't we do an interview together? Wasn't that one of the first joint interviews Freeberg
You and I did. You and I did, yeah.
Incredible book. These things are obviously addicting.
He had a very important point, which is to try and keep kids off cell phones and social media until they're 16. And he was kind of cheerleading this verdict. But, I'll take a little bit of a contrarian to the popular kind of sentiment on this. And I'll just talk broadly about this idea of tort litigation. Tort litigation, costs our economy $900 billion a year in the United States. $900 billion a year. That's how much is spent on the litigation costs, the settlements, the judgments. It's 3% of GDP, and it's growing roughly 10% per year. And these civil penalties decided by juries, like they're, going against big companies like Meta and YouTube, but it's also food companies, restaurants, everything. Anytime there's a window to sue someone and extract value from them, tort firms are all over them. It's called the tort tax now in America. And it's not just losses paid by the companies, because fundamentally, when a big company pays out these tort taxes, they're going to invest less. There's less R&D, less product development. Costs stay high. There's fewer new product launches, and there's all these crazy restrictions on stuff. So, look, I agree. Social media causes immense harm. It particularly causes harm for kids. Kids should not be on social media until they're 16. Absolutely agree. Maybe adults shouldn't either be on it, as adults. But fundamentally, I think there's an important question that we often ignore, which is who is fundamentally responsible for that harm? Should the sugar beet and sugarcane farmers be responsible for diabetes in America? Should the soda companies be responsible? The retailers selling the soda? The FDA for not stopping it all? And fundamentally, I think we have to ask the question, what role does individual choice play and individual responsibility play in this equation? If everything is a liability,
what do you think?
Because I think we have to take personal responsibility. I think the parents that are absent taking care of their children are responsible for harm to their kids. You shouldn't let your kid play with a gun. You shouldn't let your kid go to some sketchy neighborhood after hours by themselves. You shouldn't let your kid play video games 100 hours a week. You shouldn't let your kids eat nothing but soda and potato chips. You have a responsibility as a parent. And I think parents should keep kids off screens and keep kids off social media. Once the harms are known of excess use or the harms are known of exposure to this sort of thing, I think there's a responsibility that sits with the parents.
What about things like tobacco or processed food or...
Yeah, this is the key.
The same is true of alcohol. I mean, dude, like alcohol is terrible for you. There's nothing good about alcohol. But I think I should have a choice on whether or not I want to consume alcohol, whether or not I consume tobacco, whether or not I consume processed goods. And the recognition that it's bad for you should be publicized by the government, should be publicized by the company.
Right. So if I had to summarize, what you would say is product liability law makes no sense. There should be human liability and human responsibility expectations in a society.
We never talk about responsibility. We always talk about where the government failed us and where these companies f***ed us. And we never talk about what did we individually do wrong? How did I individually choose to eat 100 sodas a week? How did I individually choose to get my kids addicted to social media? Where the was I as a parent? Like, we don't talk about our responsibility. And by the way, this fundamentally addresses this point about human agency, which I think is more critical in this era than ever, because AI is going to flood us with everything all the time, nonstop. What we choose to do in a world where we're already getting everything and how we choose to not take everything that's being offered to us, I think is a critical part of what's going to distinguish human success from human failure. And it's going to become more apparent in the future. And not everything is about liability and not everything is about the government failing us. It's about people making choices. And we don't talk about it. That's
what I'll counter, I agree, personal choice, super important. What you're probably leaving out here, which you're definitely leaving out here, is when these companies know they're doing something damaging and they do it anyway. That was the key to the RJR
the whiskey
Nabisco
company
case.
What about a whiskey company selling whiskey to an alcoholic?
Okay. So
what about a potato chip company selling potato chips to an obese person?
I'll put those two aside because I don't think we've seen major cases about that. But I will say the auto industry knew for a long time about seatbelts. You remember that. And they didn't deploy them. RJR Nabisco, they knew that these were addictive and they designed the cigarettes to become more addictive, and they didn't tell people about the health risks. Asbestos, same thing. Lead paint, same thing. This has happened over and over again where corporations subvert the release of information to make additional profit. So the question here with Facebook is, did they know how addicted these were? Did they know kids were being assaulted sexually and they could have done something about it, or didn't they? And so agree that there's too much litigation.
That's absolutely true. The kids being assaulted, absolutely true.
So yeah, we agree on that one.
Not releasing information about the level of addiction if they had it, that's certainly bad. Should the product be legal, number one? And if the product is legal, who's responsible for using it? And where do we draw the line? And if we don't want people to make choice, then we shouldn't put it out there.
But if you as a corporation know it's dangerous, and then you lean into that, if you know, as is the case with Facebook, that this is super addicting, super damaging to young girls, and then you lean into making it more addictive, and you don't put safeguards in place, and you can prove that, like RJR, like asbestos, like many of these other
safeguards on whiskey? What safeguards does a whiskey company put? What safeguards does a casino put?
Hold on, you asked the question. Age is one.
But it's not about age. Yeah.
Second, after age, which is what we're really talking about with kids, and Jonathan Haidt would agree that they shouldn't be using this until they're 16. So I think that's a perfect analogy. Age gating and then labeling. And then if they know of something that's really damaging, releasing that. So there was a whole thing about alcohol in pregnancy, and they covered up in the alcohol industry or didn't disclose exactly how damaging it was to drink alcohol on a fetus or a developing fetus. And then remember all those signs went up in bars in the 70s and 80s? That was directly because of that. So labeling, information, and age gating would be the logical things to do for social media. And that's what's happened in the past. So that's the answer to your question.
I don't know about age gating, but I think informing parents about the risks is fine. Like that should be a responsibility. But the tort lawyers are one of the largest donors in political elections in the United States. They donate largely to Democrats in local elections and Republicans in national elections. And then they are the largest donor class to elections of judges. And it's a business. And I think we don't talk enough about the business of tort law, the business of litigation in this country. And we often ignore this question about choice. And I don't want to live in a world, J-Cal, where the government and companies are telling me what to do and what not to do, how to live my life, et cetera.
Sachs, jump in here. Personal freedom and personal responsibility versus, hey, corporations maybe knowingly
and
doing
parental
things.
Responsibility, J-Cal.
Parental responsibility in there as well. Yeah. What do you think, Sachs?
Well, look, there's no question that the trial lawyers want to turn Meta into RJR and Nabisco and the cigarette companies and try to fit their fact pattern around that. I just think that the activity is fundamentally different than smoking. I mean, smoking is manifestly harmful to you, regardless of what your age is. And the only reason we allow it is because of assumption of risk. It's a free country. I think in the case of social networking, it's much more unclear what the harms are and what the benefits are. And I think it's much more subjective and it's much more of a personal choice for adults and also for parents. Freeberg, I mean, one area where I disagree with you a little bit is you said the harms of this are immense and well known and understood. If that's the case, then let's just ban it for under 13 or under 16 or whatever it is. But I don't think that's the case. And because it's unclear, I think it's up to parents to decide what's appropriate for their families. And at the end of the day, I think the right way to deal with this is parental empowerment. You give parents the controls to set screen time limits or to decide what apps their kids install. Now, the debate has now moved over to AI apps, and there's a lot of parents groups that want to ban kids or teenagers from being able to use AI chat apps because there was a couple of cases of self-harm. Now, my reaction to that is, look, I've got a 10-year-old, and if he starts using ChatGPT to get answers to questions, I would consider that to be a good thing. I mean, I'll keep an eye on the usage, but I want him to be an AI native. I want him to be able to do research. I want him to be able to know how to use these tools. I want him to get the right skills to be successful in the 21st century. In China, they're incorporating AI into K through 12 education. Are we going to ban it for our kids and teenagers? I think that'd be a terrible mistake. So I think when it comes to AI and AI chat apps, it has to be up to the parents because there's too much manifest good that can come out of kids learning how to use these apps. Maybe social networking is in a different category, but I got to say, I do think that the harms have been exaggerated because the trial lawyers have an incentive. And just to give you some facts about that LA case, so just so you understand, in this LA case, they were sued by a 20-year-old woman who claimed that she became depressed because of using social media. And she apparently suffered body image issues because of social media, and she was able to win this judgment for millions of dollars. Look, I think there's big causation problems with that case. In the case of that plaintiff, the evidence showed that she came from an abusive home. Her father had abandoned her. Her own mother had body shamed her. So it was very unclear where her body image issues were coming from. I think it's possible that social media contributed to them, or it could just be that social media was a scapegoat. I also got to say that I do think it's a dangerous precedent. I mean, are we going to allow plaintiffs, lawyers to sue Spotify because you created a playlist of sad music and that music contributed to your emotional distress? I mean, that's kind of what we're saying. You got to remember, these are free services that people have a choice whether to use them or not. And if social media is making you feel bad, if listening to the wrong playlist is making you feel bad, then stop doing it. But what's going on here, I think, is the trial lawyers are trying to create the next big tobacco, and their goal is to try and sue these companies into oblivion. And I don't think that's the right answer either.
The consensus, Chamath, is kids who use this 2 or 3 hours a day. This has been across many many research studies, is that it's massively correlated with depression and anxiety, and eating disorders, specifically in young girls. Like, if you get to 2 or 3 hours a day of this. So that correlation's, I think, pretty well established. You pretty famously said, hey, and you worked at Facebook, so you saw this coming. But I think at Stanford 2018 timeframe, you actually had some comments on this. We could either play the clip or you could just describe it, I guess.
I said what was obvious to me then. I lost a lot of friends at Facebook when I said it, unfortunately. But essentially what I said was, I don't let my kids use it, and I don't think that this is a constructive part of a developing child's diet. I do think that Sachs is right that I view AI chat differently. There are different guardrails that are required so that if you go down some sort of, dark corner, but that's possible to understand, and the product is architected in a way to create cul-de-sacs. So if you're thinking about self-harm or you're thinking about these other things, social media is very different. It's an incredibly fast twitch algorithm, and that's the optimization. And until the incentive for that optimization changes, these outcomes will continue to compound. I think the interesting thing is that the LA lawsuit was an individual lawsuit. The young woman, I think, was awarded $3 or $6 million.
Yeah.
The other one, though, that they lost this week was in New Mexico, and that was for $375 million. And that was more around, I think, child exploitation.
Yeah.
The thing that I'll note is that these trial lawyers, which I'm not a fan of either, have been trying, as Sachs said and as Friedberg said, to make these folks a target because there's so much money on the line. And they've been batted back pretty successfully. But this was the first time where they were able to navigate the Section 230 protections that Facebook and Google have typically used to protect themselves, because Google was a part of the LA lawsuit. And they were able to go down the pathway of product liability language. Now, to Friedberg's point, I think he's generally right. I think it's my responsibility as a parent to take care of myself and my children. But to the extent we don't change these product liability laws that are on the books, I think the door has been opened and a map has been drawn, which is, this is how you navigate around Section 230 and you can get a decisive lawsuit in your favor against these large companies with enormous cash flows. And so I expect that this will be a death by 1,000 cuts kind of scenario where folks are just going to rally around this. I don't think it's right, but I do think that that's the rational reaction to what just happened. I mean, look, $6 million to an individual 20-year-old girl or $375 million, these are huge numbers. And the reality is that I think we've opened the floodgates. I do think there should be a better response. And I do think that parents should take a lot more responsibility. But I do hope that these products allow us a kill switch for when our kids are under the ages of 16. Frankly, I would love a kill switch under the age of 18. And there has to be simpler ways to age validate. We used to work around this thing called COPPA compliance. COPPA's bullshit. It's a nothing burger. Like a 6-year-old can vibe code their way around COPPA. So it doesn't do anything. then so age verification is completely broken. It's harder to get age verified for a porn site than it is to get unage verified for Facebook.
Say more, Chamath. How'd you get around it?
Yeah, how do you know that? How do you know
Chamath,
that?
that's just for
Oh my God.
uploading. You
Be
were
honest.
uploading at the time, Chamath. This is not your OnlyFans.
proof of age.
We actually deal with this in our new AI framework that the administration released last week, because the number one issue is around online child safety, which I think, again, is mostly about social networking, but it touches on AI. And so it's kind of gotten lumped together. And I think I'm referring now to the White House has said it's willing to support some form of age assurance technology and parental controls. So look, I think there needs to be a conversation around how true it is that social networking is just a fountain of ills for young people. If that's true, then why wouldn't you just disallow it, right? But if it's unclear, and I think it's more on the side of unclear, that's just me, then it's up to the parents. And what you want to do is, again, have the age assurance technology and the parental controls and let the parents decide.
I don't think that social media is net bad, broadly speaking. But I will tell you that if my child uses it for 2 or 3 hours a day for multiple days in a row, they become retarded.
Yes, they act weird.
And so I don't know what to tell you, except I would love a kill switch until these kids turn 18 on all these products.
Well,
This has to do with dopamine, by the way.
What I do instead is I use Apple's family sharing, but it's hard. And I'll tell you why it's hard. Our schools give our kids Chromebooks and say, use these Chromebooks because that's the way you're going to access your LMS, your information, your content, your homework. And you know what's an integral part of that? YouTube. And then now it becomes a backdoor. So even when we take the devices, I take my devices, we lock them down. You can't bring them to your room, the whole thing. But if they need to do homework and I catch them in a little break, I'm like, what are you doing on YouTube? They're looking at shorts.
Of course.
That's what they do.
Yes.
And so it is a whack-a-mole problem for parents.
I think I'll just give myself the final word here on behalf of the group. It's obviously addicting. It's obviously the industry has not policed itself, nor would they police themselves because they want to get people addicted now, so they're addicted when they're adults. The rest of the world has realized this. Australia now has 16 enforced, Malaysia 16. Other countries are right behind them, Spain, Germany, UK. And what should happen here in the United States is this should be done with the handset manufacturers. If Android and Apple showed leadership with Facebook and said, we're going to, by default, when you buy a phone, you're going to have to age verify, kids under a certain age, which you kind of do already when you create a family plan like you did. We could solve this problem. And then parents would opt in to giving their kids access to this. No good comes out of kids under 16 using social media. And Jonathan Hayes,
by the way,
in our interview, said you should be putting phone lockers in, and our school is doing that. Other schools are doing it. It is the greatest thing ever. Kids complain,
our school, no,
and then they love it.
I don't think it's that great. I'll tell you why. Our school does the phone condoms. I don't know what they're called, but like you put them in the bags and you whatever. The real problem is that there's enormous social pressure when you're in high school to use these products. I'll give you a specific example. Our rule is you cannot get Instagram or TikTok until you're 16. I would love it to be 18, but we all agreed 16 and we're able to maintain that rule. But then high school comes around and I have 2 kids in high school now. Oh, we need Snapchat. No, you don't. No, yes, we do. No, you don't. Okay, great. We'll have no friends. Thanks a lot. We'll just sit here in our room, dark and there. And, there's an enormous amount of social pressure. So when you talk to the other parents, it's like, hey guys, can we all agree that we don't need Snapchat? You just can't get uniform agreement across all parents because everybody views this problem differently. And so I had to change the rule. Now, when you get to high school, you're allowed Snapchat, but not Instagram. And, when you're 16, you get Instagram. And that's the best we could do. And TikTok and all that stuff. But
yeah,
it's an impossible task for a parent.
I find it indispensable to be able to do iMessage with my kids. And also, I like the location awareness. You can track location. You compare iMessage, those features, to Snap. Is it really that different? I don't think it's that different.
Well,
so
the problem,
you gonna ban Snap?
No, I can't. My point is I had to give them Snap. But you're right. I was like, why can't you use iMessage? They're like, Dad, don't be a loser.
Yeah.
No,
And
I signed up for
like,
a Snap account just so I could iMessage them where they are, where they're messaging. I prefer if they were just on iMessage, but anyway, that's the reality. So you can talk about banning all these things, but again, I think you're on a slippery slope. And I gotta just point
I'm
out
saying me as a parent ban them. No, I'm saying me as a parent.
Yeah, you're setting guidelines.
In my house, this are the rules. When you become a freshman, I'll give you Snap. And when you're 16, I'll give you Instagram and TikTok. Otherwise, shut the f up, put your head down.
By the way, I also have a tip for parents. You know this issue with like kids in headphones where they want to be listening to stuff all the time and you have kids walking around like zombies with headphones? I replaced their headphones with these brand called Shocks or something. It goes over your ear, but your ear's open so you can listen to an audiobook or music and still be able to talk. And so since we did that, it's like much less drama around the over-the-ear headphone issue.
Man, managing teenagers are just
Well, again,
brutal.
it sounds like you're exercising parental supervision.
Yes.
Does it really make sense that later when your kid turns 20, they could sue these companies for
to your point,
I just think it has to be
for emotional distress. That doesn't make sense.
You're right, because to your point, that girl said she was using it from the age of like 6 and 10.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
One product 6 and the other. That's crazy.
Crazy.
I agree with you, Sachs. That's crazy. Where were the parents?